From becoming a queen at only 6 days old to being executed by her cousin over claims of treason, Mary, Queen of Scots, lived a very turbulent life, which came to a very tragic end. Chaos followed her wherever she went, whether it was her multiple marriages or the betrayal from her only son. So without further ado, let's talk about the legendary Scottish queen. Mary, Queen of Scots, also known as Mary Stuart, was literally born in the middle of hostilities. She was born in 1542, a week before her father, King James V of Scotland, passed away at the age of just 30. His young daughter remained as his only living heir and became the Queen of Scotland as a newborn baby. Actually, she became more than just the Queen of Scots after his death. She was brought to France at the age of 5 to be raised to be the future spouse of Francis II of France. Around that time, King Henry VIII of England invaded Scotland, the country Mary called home. Mary was the lawful heir to the English throne because England refused to accept any of Henry VIII's children as legitimate, and she was next in line to the throne as Henry VII of England's great-granddaughter. You see, Henry VIII, her cousin, became a Protestant in order to annul his first marriage. His conversion caused a rift in his family's relationship and ignited a wave of violent disputes between Catholics and Protestants throughout the British Isles. But even after Henry's divorce, the Catholic Church refused to acknowledge any of his marriages. They thought that his children were the illegitimate offspring and believed Mary to be the rightful heir to the throne. So, Henry VIII asked for a marriage between the young Mary and his son, Edward VI, in order to stop this and keep his position of authority. Mary's claim to the throne would have been ended by the marriage, which would have made her convert to the Protestant faith. Instead, in an effort to win France's allegiance, Mary was wed off to the Catholic Prince of France, and she signed away her right to the British crown. Now, Mary represented the opportunity for the Catholics, French and Scottish to usurp the English throne. This meant that she posed the biggest threat to the English monarchy that could possibly exist. Even when she was still a baby, she was already in the middle of a gigantic continental conflict. Her fate was closely linked to the fates of not just Catholics, Protestants and monarchies in general, but also of England, Scotland and France. The rough wooing, as it came to be known, was a battle between England and Scotland. It was Henry's attempt to persuade her to reconsider the marriage proposal. But in the midst of all of this, in 1548, Mary was sent to France to marry the young Francis II in an effort to forge a Catholic coalition against Protestant England, and so she didn't come back to her homeland until she turned 18. After the young Francis died in 1561, Mary, a young widow, sadly made her way back to Scotland. Mary was sent back to govern over the nation of her birth, a place she hadn't seen since she was a little girl, when the crown of France was transferred to her brother-in-law, Charles IX. Scotland was no longer the country she had known as a child. Under the leadership of Scottish pastor, theologian and author John Knox, a rising group of Scottish Protestants had allied with the English, and the nation was now formally becoming a Protestant one. Even though Mary's cousin, the Queen, Elizabeth I, was now in charge of England, the Kingdom of France had announced that they only regarded Mary, Queen of Scots, as England's legitimate monarch. But Elizabeth declined to accept Mary as her heir, and Mary refused to sign a treaty recognizing Elizabeth as the Queen of England. By encouraging religious tolerance toward the Protestants, Mary, Queen of Scots, attempted to maintain harmony and win over the hearts of the people of Scotland. In 1565, she even wed her first cousin, Lord Darnley, an Englishman. It's said that most likely she did this to support her claim to the English throne, but the marriage actually started a chain of unfortunate events. Mary ran the entire kingdom by herself and gave him no actual power, while Darnley was an egotistical man who quickly turned into an alcoholic. He was particularly jealous of David Riccio, Mary's favourite secretary. He was convinced that Mary was having an affair with him and had Riccio killed. Oh, and he made sure that Mary watched as Riccio got stabbed multiple times, all while she was heavily pregnant. She gave birth to James, her only son, at Edinburgh Castle later that year. Because Darnley was the father of her eldest child, she was unable to divorce him in accordance with Catholic law. Here's the loophole though, she would be able to get rid of him only if he passed away. Soon enough, on the morning of February 10th, 1567, Lord Darnley was killed by an unexplained explosion at Kirkhofield residence outside of Edinburgh. Convenient, right? Mary seemed to be the prime suspect. There were rumours that James Hepburn, the 4th Earl of Bothwell and a senior advisor to Mary, had killed Darnley on her behalf. Even though Bothwell was cleared of all allegations, any remaining misgivings were only made worse when, very immediately following the end of the trial, he wed the Queen of Scots, infuriating the Scottish nobility. Sadly, Mary's third marriage to Bothwell was no better than the last one. Some say she didn't even want to marry him. Bothwell is claimed to have had a huge influence over her, despite the fact that he had grown to be a close confidant of hers. It's said that in an effort to fulfill his desire to rule the country, he used his influence over Mary. Most people believed that the two had planned to kill Darnley and that their marriage was evidence of it. So, Mary was accused of being a murderer and an adulterer. Her Protestant lords rose up in rebellion, and as a result, on June 15, 1567, her troops and the Scottish nobility engaged in combat at Carbery Hill, close to Edinburgh. After Mary's army was routed, Loch Leven Castle became her jail. Bothwell went to Scandinavia, but was caught and imprisoned there as well, where he eventually died. Mary's son James, who had only been alive for a year, was taken from her and given her crown, while she gave birth to stillborn twins while she was in jail. She escaped from Leven Castle in May 1568, after assembling a small army, but the Protestants destroyed her at Langside, and Mary ran away to England instead. Things didn't get any better there either. Mary believed that despite everything, her cousin would show some mercy. Instead, she was held captive for 19 years in many English castles by Queen Elizabeth I, who used her as a political pawn. Mary was found to be scheming against Elizabeth when secret letters sent by her to others were discovered, and she was sentenced for treason. Mary pleaded with her cousin for forgiveness and mercy in the years before her death, but her pleadings were disregarded by Elizabeth's court, which was becoming more and more anxious about their control over the throne. Because the church didn't recognise Elizabeth's father Henry VIII's marriage to her mother, Anne Boleyn, many people thought she was an illegitimate monarch of England. As a result, Elizabeth's reign was often the target of schemes, and the Queen was always worried about a coup. With Mary around, Elizabeth's fear only deepened, so Mary was accused of having planned the assassination of Elizabeth after correspondence between her jailer and a Catholic priest was uncovered, a case that became known as the Babington Plot. On the other hand, Mary's son, who was now pursuing his own political goals, understood that a relationship with Queen Elizabeth I would guarantee his own succession to her crown after her passing. So, he made an alliance with England and started to distance himself from his Scottish roots. This included leaving his mother behind, who was about to be executed, the ultimate betrayal. At Fotheringhay Castle, Mary was sentenced to death on February 7, 1587. She prayed non-stop for hours before being carried to the cross where she would die. And in her final moments, she smiled at the executioner before putting her head on the block and said, "I hope you shall make an end of all my troubles." But guess what? Even death didn't come easy to her. The axe's initial strike missed Mary's neck and lodged in the back of her head instead. The woman was still painfully alive after the second attempt, which was too feeble and left her neck severed. Finally, the third one did the job. When it was all done, the executioner raised her severed head and cried out to the audience, "God save the Queen." But her head fell to the stage, leaving the executioner holding her wig. The executioner was in for one more shock. Mary's tiny Skye Terrier was hiding under her skirts, covered in blood. And so ended the life of the Scottish Queen. Her embalmed body was kept hidden at Fotheringhay for 6 months before being buried at Peterborough Cathedral in a private ceremony. Later, she was buried at Westminster Abbey at her son's request when he became King James I of England. What a tragic end to a tumultuous life.